Welcome to Shoot Like a Girl, a podcast featuring interviews with extraordinary military women from around the world who push their limits on and off duty. I'm your host, Kate Stewart, and this is episode number 43. Today's guest is Captain Caitie Clapp. Caitie was born in Ottawa, but moved all over Canada growing up with her military parents. She attended the Royal Military College of Canada, graduating in 2010 with a bachelor's degree in chemistry and psychology, and while awaiting pilot training, she also completed a master's degree in microbiology. After receiving her pilot wings in 2012, Caitie was posted to 413 Search and Rescue Squadron in Greenwood, Nova Scotia to fly the CC-130 Hercules. While she was there, she flew over 40 search and rescue missions as well as numerous strategic airlift support missions around the world. In 2017, she was posted to 2 Canadian Forces Flight Training School in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan as an instructor, training both new RCAF pilots and instructors alike. Caitie joined the Snowbirds in 2022 and brings over 3,300 hours of military flying experience to the team. She flies the number 2 jet in the inner right wing position.
Light, hill, cover. I'm a steamroller, baby.
I'm a steamroller, baby.
Just a rolling down the line.
Just a rolling down the line.
I'm a steamroller, baby.
I'm a steamroller, baby.
Just a rolling down the line.
Just a rolling down the line.
So you better get out of my way now.
So you better get out of my way now.
Or I roll all over you.
Before I roll all over you.
Caitie, welcome to the podcast. We crossed paths a number of times this summer, so I'm happy that we're finally sitting down to do an interview.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I always like to start from the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Ottawa, but we didn't last long there. My parents were military, so we moved around a lot as a kid. I ended up a bunch of different places, and now every 4 years I definitely get the itch to move around. Seems weird to be in a place for too long.
Yeah, which is kind of the opposite of most people, I would imagine. You'd think that they'd like to be settled in the same spot for a long time. What did your parents do in the military?
My mom was an admin, a clerk, and my dad flew TACHEL, and that's actually where they met. They were deployed together over in Egypt, and then they came back, ended up together. They got out of the military for a while, and we moved out to Vancouver Island, and they did some business out there, and then my dad got back into the military. And my mom did the civilian equivalent of clerk work. And my dad flew at 408, and then we went to Winnipeg, and then we went to Cold Lake, and then I went to Kingston, and they came to Kingston. So yeah, we've been all over.
That's definitely a lot of moving around for such a young age. What sort of sports and activities were you involved in as a kid?
I wanted to do all the activities. I definitely didn't want to miss out on anything. I was determined to go to the Olympics or play in a concert pianist or something like that. So I did everything growing up. But as I got older, I definitely moved more into liking sports. I did a lot of sports growing up.
And so since your dad was a pilot, is that sort of what led you down that path?
You would think so, but not really. I wanted to be a vet my whole life. That was the goal until I got into my teenage years. I did some job shadowing, and I just came to the conclusion that I could never put an animal to sleep, so that wasn't the job for me. I also saw our family dog's anal glands got drained, and I was like, oh, that's definitely not the job for me. So then I was hemming and hawing. I didn't really know what to do. I was good at chemistry, so I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll do something like that. A lab tech or pharmacy became a thing. I went to high school in Cold Lake, and the guidance counselors there were drilling everyone at the time, you're going to be an engineer. You either become an engineer or power engineer, and you work in the oil fields. That was the thing to do. You go to Edmonton for school, you come back, you work in the oil fields. I knew I didn't want to do that. So then I was like, okay, maybe pharmacy. So I did a job shadowing for that. And I was like, oh, I don't like this either. I don't want to own a London Drugs or a Rexall and count pills all day. But I ended up applying to the military for pharmacy, and pilot was actually my second choice, and I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did. So I had a long road, and considering that my father was a pilot and my grandfather was a pilot, I just didn't think that it was for me until it was.
That's so funny that pilot was your second choice, but you still ended up getting it, because I feel like it's so many people's first choice, and then they end up having to do something else because it's just so competitive.
Yeah, I'm super thankful. It definitely checked all the boxes that I was looking for as a high school student of I wanted to get out of my hometown. I wanted a scholarship to pay for school. I wanted to do something that was super challenging. I just didn't put like that thing and me in the same envelope until, I don't really know. I think we had a family friend who came to visit, and there was an air show actually going on outside where we lived in Cold Lake. And he brought up the fact that like, oh, the first female snowbird pilot is about to be the commanding officer. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. It's not that I didn't think girls could fly. I just like literally didn't add one and one together to make two, even though it was in my life day in, day out since birth, essentially. But like that little comment was like enough to like plant a seed that I went home and looked up like, oh, the military will teach me how to fly. Oh, there has been girls that have done this before. The military will give me a scholarship to go to school. Oh, I get to leave Cold Lake and go and do university in a new town. Like it was just like, check, check, check. Oh, perfect. And then went and did the interview and was like, I don't want to be a pharmacist. Can I do this? And they were like, let's do that. And then all the dominoes fell after that.
So did you end up going to RMC then?
I did go to RMC, yeah.
And how did you find that? Because I always think it would be hard to balance the academic requirements with the military requirements like parades and doing drill, and also the various other sports and activities that you have to be involved in at RMC.
Yeah. There's like essentially 4 pillars is what they call it when you go to RMC. You have to do your military training and be successful at that. The academics, obviously, be successful in that. Then there's the PT portion, and then you have to be bilingual to graduate with an RMC degree, none of which I was particularly good at or had any prior. Like I could not speak a lick of French, even though my mother is French. PT, it took a while for me to figure out how to get into that. And then military training obviously happens as you go through your 4 years of your degree. And school, yeah, I was like, okay, it doesn't matter what degree I get, so I'm going to study what I'm interested in. So thankfully I got to do chemistry and psychology, and then I had a really good professor / thesis supervisor in my last year, so he really bolstered that and let me work in his lab, and I worked in some of his classes for the junior science classes, so that was really good. But yeah, RMC was good. It provided me direction and forced me to learn the discipline required to check off those 4 pillars to like get to the end of my degree and get the little RMC post-nominal after my name.
I also think RMC is a great choice because so many people go to civilian university, and when they finish, they have so much debt from student loans, and they're also not necessarily guaranteed a job in their field. So with RMC, you can finish university without student loans, and the day you're finished school, you have a job.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like super overlooked. Is your job is literally to go to school and you get a salary. It's small, but you don't need much. You have a place to live, you have a place to go and eat, you go to school, you get a little paycheck, and then you go and you work in your field of choice, essentially. And then at the end of it, you can either stay and continue on, or if it isn't for you, you can leave and you have no debt and you have experience. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. From time to time, there also is the ROTP option to go to a civilian university. But I think for me, I chose RMC because it was away from my hometown. It was something different. It was going to be the discipline that I needed to make me go to class, make me learn the military stuff. Whereas I think I would have let myself get away with a little bit too much and maybe wouldn't have been successful if I had to force myself to get out of bed and go to class and sit with a civilian instructor and a subject that I didn't care about or whatever. So it definitely was a good choice for me, and I would do it again if I had to go back.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons because at civilian university, you don't get immersed in the military culture, and maybe you don't have as many extracurricular requirements. But at the same time, there might be more temptations to party and skip class. But with RMC, you're also going to school with and working with people that you're going to have connections with for the rest of your career. And that networking is huge later on down the road.
That's a huge part, that networking part is as well. Like now, no matter where I get posted or what course I'm going on, there's always that like baseline connection of like, oh, I recognize that person or I know that person and we kind of did the same thing. So we have like an instant connection of sorts.
And during your summers, did you get some sort of on-the-job experience at various Air Force squadrons to figure out what type of aircraft you might like to fly?
That's generally how it goes. But for me, I actually am, I think, an oddity in the piloting world in that I never did any OJT jobs. And I knew that I wanted to be a snowbird in the back of my mind. And if that wasn't the first case, I knew maybe like search and rescue was kind of an interest to me as well. So my summers consisted of not flying jobs. My first summer before the start of college was the first half of basic training. And then we had a second basic training at that time, which I did after my first year. And then after my second year, I did French training to work on getting my bilingual qualification. And then after my third year, some pilots, depending on the training system, got to go and do their phase 1 pilot training, but I didn't. So I got to do the 9 Megan marches. And so I spent a summer preparing for that. And then I did a little bit of first year orientation program for the new first years coming in. And I did that for a little bit of the summer. And then after fourth year, that's when I started my pilot training. So I really never did go sit at a squadron and work the ops desk kind of thing. I just kind of knew roughly what I wanted, and that was good enough for me. So I chose other things to do in the summers. But it's really based on the timing and what's available and what you want to do. So I got to do what I needed to do and what I wanted to do. So it worked out nicely.
Yeah, the 9 Megan marches would be an amazing experience for an officer cadet going to RMC. That was one of the highlights of my careers, so to have that early on would be something really special.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, it was really, really good.
And did you have an idea of what aircraft you wanted to fly before you started your flight training?
I really wanted to fly, or I thought I wanted to fly the Buffalo and do search and rescue in Comox. Search and rescue, I thought was super cool and super like hands-on, like the mission is happening every single time. And then I was like, oh, well, Comox is beautiful and everybody wants to live on the island, so I want to live on the island. And the Buff was kind of like an older plane, so it wasn't going to be around forever. So I was like, that'd be kind of cool to experience that.
What was the most stressful part of flight school for you?
Oh, man. The most stressful part of flight school was, I mean, all of it is stressful, really. I had no prior flying experience whatsoever. I remember getting to the second phase of training to ground school and like, what do you mean we can fly in cloud? Like, what do you mean we can do this? It was a lot. I would say phase 1 was really fun because everything was new and exciting. But phase 2 is definitely the most stressful for me. There's a lot of personal pressure you put on yourself to perform. But it really is at that phase of training where you feel like your entire career is being decided for you, because based on A, timing and the needs of the forces, but B, your personal performance will dictate whether you fly helicopters, whether you fly multi-engine aircraft, or whether you get streamed to be like a fast jet pilot. So it was like every flight is a test, and every flight's score essentially streams you to where the rest of your career was going to be. And at that time, I don't think that I had the best skill set to deal with those stressors. And I wasn't exactly the highest performer struggling under those stressors. So that was definitely a hurdle in my pilot career early on.
That sounds like a hugely stressful situation because your future is depending on it. And there's a lot of external pressure from your instructors for you to pass, but then also self-induced pressure, the pressure that you put on yourself. So in those situations where failing a flight might mean going home or not becoming a pilot, what methods did you use to focus and to help calm your nerves?
You would think that the amount of failures that I've encountered through my career that I would have like a really good answer to that question. And the fact that I was an instructor then on that course afterwards, that I would have a good answer that I would pass on to my students, but I really don't. The high stressor situations, I would say just put yourself through it and work through a bunch of different coping mechanisms until you can find out the one that works best for you. At the time when I was going through phase 2 myself, I don't think I was able to compartmentalize very well. And I got really hung up on any tiny little mistake meant, oh, my career was in jeopardy. And I just couldn't get over it. It would spiral downward. So my tests were not the best flying, and tests were worth a lot of points. And it just kind of like was a death spiral, really. And it wasn't until I had a really good instructor that kind of picked me up out of the gutter and was like, get yourself together. Let's work through this and figure out, how to get you through this course and how to cope with the stressors or cope with making mistakes. And I think then as my training went on, I kind of settled into myself and worked through a bunch of different things, whether it was like better visualization, more what we call chair flying or like practice flying, whether it was self-talk in the aircraft. And I think now that I've got a few thousand hours under my belt and I've instructed other students, I would say just like try one method, and if that doesn't work and you fail, that's all right. Go again, fail again until you find something that you don't fail at and use that method over and over. And unfortunately now my best advice that I use is self-talk. And it's probably negative most of the time, negative self-talk, like, get yourself together, Caitie. What are you doing? Da, 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 da. But that works for me, just to like bring myself back to myself of like, okay, we're messing up, like, get it together. We're going to continue on and we're going to mess up again, but we're going to get it together again. And then we're going to continue on. And it's just an endless cycle like that.
I think that is the key, because in a way it is good to have some negative self-talk, because that's what keeps us improving and constantly getting better. If we were completely satisfied with our performance, then we might not feel the need to try and better ourselves. But I think it's a happy medium, because too much negative self-talk can definitely be detrimental, especially if you start getting spun up thinking about mistakes that you made in the past. So for example, if you had a bad flight and then you have a test the following flight and you keep thinking about all the mistakes that you made in the past, then that's going to affect your performance on the test. So you need to be able to let things go and focus on your performance for the future.
Absolutely. That's 100% the thing that I just reminded the students every time we went flying together is like, you're going to mess up. And that's why I'm here as the instructor, or that's why you have crew members, or that's why you have more flights to go. Like, we're going to go out and we're going to mess up even on purpose. And we're just going to realize what that feels like. And then we're going to go and do it again. And guess what? It's probably going to be better. And if it's not better, guess what? We'll do it again. And you're just going to keep going and keep going until it does get better. And that's the whole point. It's this stress of like, it has to be perfect. And it just took me a little bit longer than maybe others to realize that it doesn't have to be perfect. We mess up all the time. I think even pilots looking at other pilots are like, oh man, they're perfect. They're the best pilot ever. They never mess up. That's absolutely not true. We mess up all the time. In the Snowbirds themselves, in our little team, like, we make errors all the time is what we say, but we can never make mistakes. We make errors all the time. We debrief errors all the time. Every flight, you rarely, if ever, have a perfect flight. And so you just have to constantly remind yourself that it's okay to mess up. It's okay to have these little failures, but just keep going, keep going, keep going, and it will get better.
I think that's very similar to how we do things in skydiving, because we make errors during our jumps, but we never want to make mistakes. And we need to make errors in order to get better. You need to try new things to figure out what works and how to be dialed in for your landing patterns, for your formations. Maybe you try something new in your landing pattern and you don't land exactly on the target. But did you land on your feet? Did you land safely? Did you hurt yourself? No. Did you hurt anyone else? No. So that was an error, but not a mistake. Because in skydiving, like in flying, mistakes can be deadly. So we definitely want to avoid those.
Couldn't agree more. I think the errors are something like, I don't want to quantify it with big errors or small errors or anything like that, but errors are like something that you're recognizing something is straying from the ideal, and you're able to see it, figure out how to correct it, and make it better along the way. Whereas a mistake, you want to avoid the mistakes because it's a larger or more significant deviation from the ideal that could lead to these catastrophic events, like a bad landing, or like with us hitting another aircraft, or rejoining in the wrong order, or making a bad picture because you're not in position, kind of thing, right? But all those little tiny errors are what help you get better and avoid the mistakes.
So our civilian skydiving coach that we have for the Skyhawks, his name is JP McCann, and he's been coaching the Skyhawks for, I think, 37 years now. His phrase that he always says is, make great decisions. So every jump I do, I'm always thinking about that, and I always hear his voice in the back of my head.
Yeah, that's funny. I think those little mantras help too. You develop them as you go through your training and your career as a skydiver, as a pilot, as a whatever, insert profession here. I think I have a couple of them as well from my phase 1 instructors. One was airspeed is life. when you're flying. And the other one, it would drive me crazy when she would tell me all the time, but she'd say it in a Mary Poppins voice. She'd be like, strive for perfection. So I always just remind myself of that.
So just going back to something that you had mentioned before, I have heard a lot of pilots talk about the importance of chair flying. So can you please explain to us, for those who don't know, what chair flying is?
I don't know if you've seen the Blue Angels documentary, but they do a little segment on this. Chair flying is basically a visualization tool where you essentially run through an entire maneuver or section of a flight or an entire flight, and you see it in your mind, and you can even move your body a little bit to run through exactly what's going to happen so that you feel prepared sitting at 1G on the ground in your chair. And you can go up and replicate that or try to replicate it as best as possible once you get in the aircraft and there's all these other things going on. Chair flying, we start right from phase 1 through phase 2. You have to chair fly. You have to visualize. You have to practice your flights before you actually get in the plane. And then we use that every day at the Snowbirds as well. We chair fly together as a team. We run through the entire show every time before we step to the aircraft, where the boss, Snowbird 1, will verbalize the entire show and all the maneuvers that we're doing, and we follow along in our head with our eyes closed or open or whatever works for you, to see what it's going to feel like before you actually go and do it in the plane.
We do that in skydiving as well. So everyone will do visualizations on their own, but then we also do what's called a dirt dive, where everyone involved in that jump, whether it's a free fall jump with a formation or a canopy relative work jump with a canopy formation, all of those individuals will get together and walk and talk through all of the stages of the jump while they're on the ground. We even have aircraft mock-ups so that we can practice our exits before we get in the aircraft.
Yeah, super valuable.
So when you started your pilot training, did you have an end goal of wanting to become a snowbird?
I did, yeah. Because of that family friend mentioning it, that planted the seed. I went to RMC. I knew I wanted to be a pilot. I got a stream to be a multi-engine pilot, and I did search and rescue for 4 years first. And then I knew I wanted to try out to be on the Snowbird team. So I came back to Moose Jaw, to the flight training school, to be an instructor, to build up the ejection seat high performance time to do a tryout. So yeah, it was the goal.
I would think that would be the goal for most Canadian pilots, because for me, during the summers, I would go to air shows and see the Snowbirds. They were such a distinct part of my childhood, and I'm sure they're probably the exact same airplanes that are flying now, but it was just so memorable. So I would think that that's high up on the list of most Canadian Forces pilots.
I mean, that's the goal of the squadron, is to have that exact effect on little girls and boys across the country, for sure. I think nowadays it is the goal for a lot of pilots, and it should be. We are supposed to be the epitome of skill, professionalism, and teamwork for the whole Canadian Forces. I know a lot of pilots nowadays really want to do operational tours. So I was pretty lucky in that I got to go and do a 4-year operational tour, and then I got to come back and do the Snowbirds. So we're always looking for people, and if you're interested, there's a spot for you to be a part of the Snowbirds, to pass that on, because now that I've done the things that I've wanted to do, the next goal would be, as part of the Snowbirds, to pass that on and show to other little girls or boys or whoever that maybe this could be for them as well.
Well, I'm sure you're inspiring lots of future Snowbirds at the various air shows that you go to throughout the summer. So what was it like flying search and rescue aircraft? Oh,
it was awesome. It was awesome. Like I said, I wanted to be a Buffalo search and rescue pilot on Vancouver Island. So when I got streamed to go multi-engine, and I did my phase 3 flight training, which happens in Portage la Prairie, and I flew the King Air. After that, that's when they select you to your actual community of flying and the aircraft that you're going to fly. So I did that course, and again, it's based on timing and performance, and my performance was significantly better on phase 3 than phase 2. So I was hoping to get what I wanted, but then the timing factor comes in that there was no Buffalo spots available at the time. So I got selected to go to Greenwood and fly the H model Hercules and do search and rescue, which probably pretty immaturely I was pretty upset about at the time, because I was like, oh, I worked so hard. This isn't fair. I'm not getting what I want. I've never been to Greenwood. This sucks. Nova Scotia is the worst. They actually did like a little geocaching exercise where we went out and we had to find these little geocache bundles in the woods to find out our posting. And I just remember finding my little bundle and realizing that I was going to Greenwood to fly the Herc and not the Buffalo. And I was just so mad, and I had a little temper tantrum out in the woods by myself. But anyways, I like packed up my bags, did the military thing, said yes, sir, and went to Greenwood at 413 Squadron, and it was amazing. It was exceeded any expectations I could have had. Flying Star was so rewarding. The crews were amazing. The search and rescue technicians are like top-notch professionals. It was just so exciting. It was just the best. I can't say enough good things about flying search and rescue in the RCAF.
Doing geocaching is a very unique way to find out your future, to say the least. Do you have any particularly memorable stories from search and rescue? Maybe a certain rescue that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky in that I got a lot of SAR call-outs. Like how it happens is something bad will happen, whether a boat or hunters or something needs to be searched for and rescued. A call will go to the Joint Rescue Coordination Center. Greenwood Center is in Halifax. Halifax would call the squadron and say, hey, we have this missing hunter up 50 miles south of Iqaluit. We want to send the Herc and the helicopter. And then they call the crews in, and the crews launch within 30 minutes of that phone call. And we go out and we start the search and complete a rescue as required. So I don't know if it was just like the stars aligned for me, but generally when I was scheduled, I got a call, which is a bad day for someone, but a good day for me because I actually got to do my job. So I got a lot of really, really cool rescues working just the Herc on our own, or we would go out as a duo with a helicopter. Anytime the helicopter went out to sea, we had to go with them as a top cover. So I just remember a lot of call outs, a lot of, wake up in the middle of the night and go out. Within my first 3 months on the squadron, so I probably had like barely 100 hours on the Herc. I was a brand new first officer. We got called out in the middle of the night to go. There was a fishing vessel, I think, with an injured person on board, so we escorted the helicopter out and we dropped flares out, and then the helicopter sends down search and rescue technicians, 2 of them on a hoist down to the boat, and I think provided medical care and saved that guy. I believe the SAR tech actually got a Medal of Bravery for that one. It was pretty crazy weather-wise. And then in that same night, we got a second call and we went up to northern Quebec for a plane crash. These guys had tried to take off with a moose in the back of their small little aircraft and ended up crashing their plane into a lake up in the middle of nowhere, Quebec. And again, we dropped flares and we sent SARTECs out the back, and they took care of the guys until they could come and get picked up. So that was really, really exciting and really, lit the fire of like, oh man, this is awesome. I'm so excited to be here and be doing this. And that was just the start. That was in the first 3 months. So I've had quite a few crazy, scary, exciting missions during my 4 years there.
Yeah, I would imagine on most rescue missions, the weather is terrible because that's generally when bad things happen. So when you're on call, how much of a life can you actually have? Because I would imagine it would be hard to go out for a run if you've got to be taking off within 30 minutes.
Yeah, they build a pretty good schedule, so you can have close to, quote unquote, a normal life. You have like a day crew that lives. We do everything together at the squadron from like, I think it was like 7:30 to 4:30 during the day. We go and eat lunch together, or we go do training together. And that's the 30-minute response time. And then after hours, you have a 2-hour response time. So you could be out getting groceries or whatever, and then you get the call and you got to leave your card at the till. But then you have time to run back to the house, change, and get to work. And then we have backup crews, and then we have holiday crews and specialty crews and stuff like that. But it's a pretty good life. And depending on the schedule, it isn't too bad. Occasionally, you'll get the call of like, oh, you're going out to wherever to find whoever, and then you're gone for 5 days. We did a call out for some missing hunters up north of Iqaluit, and we took off, I think it was late afternoon, and we stayed up in Iqaluit. We were there for 5 days, running like revolving search for 5 days until we found them. So in that regard, yes, it could have upturned your life, but I was happy to do it. It was still young and exciting in my first tour, so it was all good.
Yeah, it sounds very busy, but also very rewarding because you're actually out doing the job for real.
You're doing it for real and you see the immediate effects of your job. Like, okay, there's this situation going on. Here's the call. I accept the mission. I'm going out and I'm going to see the mission through to completion.
So after you're posting to Greenwood, what are the next steps for you? What does the selection process and the training process look like to become a member of the Snowbirds?
So the selection process is really dependent on the current team and how they want to run it and what they need for the next year. So when I was going through the selection process, the general base requirements was you needed 1,500 hours total time flying for the military. You needed 1,000 hours ejection seat or high performance aircraft. And you needed basically a letter of recommendation or the support of your chain of command to apply. So sitting in Greenwood on the Herc, I wasn't going to get the 1,000 hours that I needed. So I elected to go back to be an instructor on the Harvard 2 at the training school in Moose Jaw. And that's where I built up my hours. And then I applied a couple times until the CO agreed and said, yeah, you can go and do that. Then across the CAF, all the applications go to 431 Squadron and they review them and they select up to, again, it depends on the year, but my year they selected 7 people, I believe, to come and do a tryout. And our tryout ended up lasting 3 weeks. We did 9 flights and a bunch of other activities, we'll say, tryout activities to see like how we would fit in with the team if we had the skills, the base skills required flying wise and all the other things that we look for in a snowbird pilot. And then at the end of that tryout period, they tell you, yes, you've made it, you didn't make it, or yeah, you made it, but at a different time, you'll come to be a snowbird. So it really depends on the current team and the needs of the squadron, how the actual selection process is run. But that's how mine went.
So after you get selected and they say, okay, you're going to become a member of the team, what does the training process or preparation for the season look like? And is that done in Comox?
Some of it is in Comox. I think there's a misnomer that people think it's a part-time gig and we just show up and we put on these aerobatic shows for 5 months of the year, but that's absolutely not the case. So I did a tryout in 2020. Like I said, there was 7 of us. 1 guy left on the first day, and then another tryout candidate ended up staying at the squadron for a little bit to do some more training to get more familiar with fixed wing stuff. And then the other 4 guys, I guess, went and started their training right away. And then I went back to the school for a year, and then I came in August of 2022. And in the winter, we're actually more busy than in our air show season, is what we call it. So it's a revolving cycle. It's like a broken record. It happens the same way, and it's happened like this for 55 years of the squadron history. From November to April, the squadron basically works Monday to Friday. Depending on aircraft serviceability, we fly twice a day, every day, Monday to Friday. And that's the time when we train the new people how to fly the aircraft, and then we train them how to fly formation. And then we build a new show and we maintain our proficiency, our base proficiency on the aircraft. And then in April, because the weather is not that great in southern Saskatchewan in April, we go to Comox to do 4-week, we call it a surge or like high tempo flying. We'll fly 6 to 7 days a week, twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. And that's just the team members. And we really like refine the show and put the finishing touches on it. And then from May until October, that's when we'll travel around the country and the United States, and we'll fly at least every weekend, if not a mid show or a midweek show. And we do that, like I said, from May until October. And then we all come home at the end of October. We do a home closer. We have a little party to celebrate a successful show season. And then we go on about 2 weeks of annual leave. And then the process starts again. We come back to work in November. We train the new guys, blah, 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 blah.
So when we see the Snowbirds in formation, you guys are obviously flying very close together. For someone who isn't a pilot, to put it in simple terms, what is the technique you use to do this? Is everyone flying, for example, based off of the person to their left or right? Or how do you do this without hitting each other midair?
Yeah, face trust and pixie dust, really. We just go up there and wing it. That's not true. We get selected for a certain position. Again, I think a misnomer is that people think we could fly wherever within the 9-plane formation, and absolutely not. I am a snowbird number 2, so I fly in the inner right wing position, and that's literally the only position that I know how to fly. And all of us learn to fly the maneuvers, which eventually build a show based on that position, looking a certain way, all at the number 1 aircraft. And so whatever he does, we base all of our movements around him and how he moves and how he speaks on the radio. And so we start a little bit further apart, and we don't start in a 9-plane. We learn to fly the aircraft by ourselves. And then we'll fly 2 planes together, and then we'll add 3 planes, and then we'll go up to 5 planes, and then 7 planes, and then we build up to 9 planes as we gain proficiency in our position and we gain comfort with the aircraft. And we'll be about, depends on the day, 10 feet apart. Our normal operating, like easy breathing position is about 4 feet apart. And then as we gain more trust in each other and trust in the boss, our number 1 pilot, then we can go, some maneuvers will go up to like 0, what we call wingtip spacing, or 0 feet of overlap. Like our wingtips will be in line with each other. It takes a whole winter and probably half a summer to move in tighter and tighter and tighter.
I find it really crazy and interesting to see the videos from the point of view of the pilots inside the cockpit, looking at the other planes.
And it's crazy. In your tryout, you're like, I've never been this close to another plane. This is crazy. I'm uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a terrible pilot. Your confidence is just crushed. And slowly, we build it back up until by the middle of your first season with the team, I don't even know how to describe it. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, but it's not a big deal. You don't have to think about it that hard.
It's a similar mentality when you start Skyhawks training camp, because when you're civilian skydiving, you're always told to stay far away from other canopies in the sky, because if you get close, it's going to be a disaster. Then at Skyhawks training camp, you are told to literally fly your canopy into someone else, and they are going to grab onto your lines and hook their feet under your slider, and then you're flying in a 2-stack formation or a 3-stack or whatever other formations we have on the team.
Yeah, same idea.
And so how many years would a pilot typically spend on the Snowbirds?
Typically, it's a minimum of 2 years, because you start as a junior pilot and you learn how to be a snowbird. And then your second year, you would train a new junior pilot to basically replace you. But the maximum amount of time is kind of up in the air. It's up to the member. It's up to the needs of the squadron. It's up to if there's people coming in to replace us. So I would say a minimum of 2, maximum of undetermined.
And what is your favorite part about being a snowbird?
I mean, selfishly, the flying is amazing. This is not any type of flying that I will probably be able to replicate or do again anywhere outside of this unit. So that's a huge part, the flying. The second one, again, selfishly, is like the feeling of accomplishing something that, I've worked at for so long. Of like, oh, I wanted to be a snowbird for 16 years, and here I'm actually doing it. So like the personal pride of getting to do that every day is a really big deal. But the actual snowbird job, meeting all of the people at airports and air shows and stuff, especially the little kids and stuff who just think it's like so amazing that you're doing that. And I kind of knew that was going to be a thing of like meeting the kids and quote unquote inspiring the next generation of pilots or potential pilots, but also seeing the mothers who think that it's so cool that a female is doing this and their kids can look and think that it's normal for them to do that. I think that's really, really a rewarding part of the job.
There are so many rewarding parts of the job. We're traveling around to air shows throughout the summer, speaking to the public. There's lots of public engagement. We're signing autographs at the signature booth, inspiring younger kids to show them that they can do this too. And for the most part, it's really fun and it's really exciting. But there are some more difficult aspects to it, like being on the road for 6 months out of the year. So for you, what do you find to be the more difficult parts?
That's definitely a huge one. The moving around. Every week you're living in a new hotel and stuff. You're eating, you think it's fun to eat out, and that lasts about 2 weeks. And then you're like, I just want a home cooked meal. Being away from your family, your spouse, your children. That's a big deal. It's pretty exhausting. And honestly, we're a team and we're pretty close knit, and we're super trusting of one another's ability to keep ourselves safe and keep the team safe. But it is exhausting being with those same people day in, day out, literally 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day from April until October. You got 11 pilots with big type A personalities, perfectionists. There's going to be some conflicts here and there. So working through those, because they're personal and professional conflicts, and there's no getting away when you're all together moving around as a unit. So there's definitely some challenges on that front.
I think it's good that you guys can fly yourselves from point A to point B and you don't have to worry about dealing with commercial airports.
Oh yeah, that's I mean, it's good and bad. Our planes are very old. I mean, you were, I think, half joking about the planes you saw as a kid. Yeah, those are definitely the same planes. It's been the same plane since 1961. So we're just hoping and praying and knowing that our techs are doing a really, really good job taking care of the aircraft maintenance-wise. But you hope there's no big maintenance issues as you move from place to place.
With that being said, is there talk of getting new planes for the Snowbirds in the future?
There definitely is, and there has been for a long time. Unfortunately, procurement in the military isn't a fast-moving machine. So these current aircraft, which, like I've said, have been in service to the RCAF since 1961, they started out as the training aircraft for all RCAF pilots would learn to fly on these tutor jets. And then in the 2000s, I believe, they got replaced, and now they're just Snowbird planes. And so they've been Snowbird planes for the past 2.5 decades. There is talks by 2030 that we should be getting new planes, because the airframe is just out of hours, and the fatigue management and the maintenance schedules is just getting to be too much to continue using them. So hopefully 2030, there might be something new on the horizon for us to look to.
Well, hopefully you get some shiny new planes in the future. Another question I have has to do with being on the road. How do you maintain health and fitness while you're traveling? Because like you said earlier, it gets pretty tiring having restaurant meals after a couple of weeks. And sometimes when we're at air shows, there's not the biggest selection of healthy food. The hotel gyms sometimes have a dumbbell rack if you're lucky, but not always. So what do you do to maintain health and fitness?
It's definitely a huge challenge, especially with our tailored flight suits. There's no hiding. It really keeps you on the rails to look good in your red flight suit. Each person handles it differently. I really enjoy working out. I love, looking after my health and fitness. So I seek out opportunities to go and find a way to work out. For me, I really like visiting all the different CrossFit gyms at all the towns that we go to. So I try and find places like that close to hotels. I've really fallen in love with like the Peloton machine. So I do a lot of spinning. A lot of hotels have a Peloton machine. If neither of those options are available, we'll do like group like hikes. We'll run some stairs. I did like a running program last year for a half marathon just to keep me out, keep me moving. Yoga studios, just look for that sort of thing. And if none of that is available, like a baseline thing is you just got to prioritize your proteins at your meals and just steps per day. Just keep yourself moving, keep yourself sleeping well is a big one, not getting sick. So find whatever works for you. For me, that's CrossFit and spin class or Peloton, but it's different for everyone. But it's definitely a big thing to have to think about.
I think it definitely helps to be on a team of like-minded people who are also into physical fitness. So when you don't have too many options available, you can do group activities like that. So what's next for you? What are your goals after the Snowbirds?
Good question. Everyone always asks that. This was such a big goal for so long that what's next is, I don't know. I really miss crew flying. I miss flying with a first officer. I miss flying with SARTEX. I miss big planes, going far, doing cool missions. So I really, really want to go back to crew flying. If I could do VIP transport flying Challengers in Ottawa. That would be my next goal, or something out of Trenton would be awesome. My spouse lives in Petawawa, so that's another challenge, getting close together, but also both of us getting to do what we'd like to do. So flying is the main goal, to continue flying for the rest of my career in the RCAF. After that, I don't know. There's a lot of different question marks. Who knows? I'm sure something will develop. I'm hoping something will develop, and then I can build off of that. I do like to have goals. I think they're super important. I think it doesn't have to be a huge thing, a huge, huge goal. If I can find little things that keep me moving in the direction that I like, then eventually the goal will build and build and build, and then there will be some new big goal. I just don't know what that big goal yet is.
So then will this be your last season with the Snowbirds?
For now, yeah, this is scheduled to be my last season.
So my final question that I always ask everyone is, what advice would you give to women looking to join the military? In this case, specifically those that want to be pilots and maybe even snowbird pilots.
Sure, yeah. I would say the stock standard answer is just to do it. Don't overthink it. Know that it's going to be hard and you're going to mess up, but just do it anyways. I think a lot of people let the fear of how hard it could be, or all the things that they could mess up, get in the way of even trying. That's just mind-boggling to me. Just try it. Like, who cares? You are going to mess up. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you, it is going to be hard. There's going to be days where you hate it and you don't want to be there. But in the end, I would rather know that I tried it and that I gave it my all than not tried at all. And like, one of my favorite quotes that I always think about when this question comes up is like, sometimes the fear does not subside, but you have to just do it afraid. I think it was Elizabeth Elliot said that. And that's a huge thing. Like, it's going to be scary. Just do it anyways. And then after you do it, the confidence from that success is going to propel you to the next thing. And that's goes back to goal setting. Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a snowbird pilot. You don't have to be a skyhawk. It could be just like, I want to finish basic training. Go and do that. And then you'll finish basic training, and then you'll be able to set a new goal and you can go chase that one, and just do it anyways. That's my big advice.
That's very solid advice. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm very happy that we finally got to sit down for this interview.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. The best way to help support the podcast is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other listening platforms. It also helps if you leave a rating and review. To stay up to date on future episodes, you can follow my Instagram page at Shoot Like a Girl Podcast. There's also a link tree with links to my Amazon storefront, as well as my YouTube page.